Hi, and welcome to my hopefully comprehensive guide to using this Homestuck skin by, what's that say, X15LM204. So, shout out to this person as well as all these contributors for doing a lot of amazing work. This is such a good work skin that it has become public and is therefore available to everybody. You don't have to know anything about CSS coding or really that much about HTML code to use this successfully. And hopefully, this video guide will help you do that. I think that just kind of reading guides written out on a page can be a little bit obtuse sometimes. So I hope that seeing somebody do it will be helpful. Those of you who wish to learn. So let's get started. For purposes of this video, I have pre-prepared two test documents because this is actually going to be a two-part video series. This first one is going to be kind of something as comprehensive as I can make it, and it's going to be very basic. And it should cover any questions that you have. And the reason that I think there needs to be two videos instead of just one is because there are two different ways that you can work with this skin. And I will show you the difference between these two test documents that I've made. So this is the first one. This is the one we're going to be dealing with today. And this one has a little bit of everything because I wanted to show you all different types of things that you can do with this skin. And the way that I've done this is I have included, there's prose here, and the prose has italics in it. Then there is some pastelog dialogue, and then it's intercut with some more prose, and then more pastelog dialogue, and then some more intercut prose. This prose having pastelog dialogue in the prose, which is something I will definitely be showing you how to do. And then a bunch of pastelog lines, one after the other. And then I think one final line of prose. And this, you may have noticed, is actually not exactly what it looks like in the comic, because in the comic, it looks like this. The lines are all flush with one another. Now, the way that AO3 processes things means that it will kind of only, it's kind of hard to explain. It's like, um, got a little tongue-tied. Okay, so the way that AO3 will natively interpret breaks between lines, right, will be like this with space between each line. That is very typical for a website like this, and that is how it is kind of always going to default. So if you want your dialogue or you want anything to look like this, where it is all flush with each other, you're going to have to work against AO3, which means that you are going to have to do a little bit more intensive coding. It's nothing crazy, nothing excessive, and nothing that's particularly difficult. But it is a little bit more involved. And I think that if you're going to try doing it like that, you should be coming into it with a strong basis. So that's why I think we're going to save this for a second video once we kind of get through the nitty gritty of this first video. And we're going to start where all things start, and that's going to be at the beginning. So when you are making a new work, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to have it all formatted somewhat in your word processor and then kind of sorry, you have to know what AO3 is going to conserve and what it will not. So these font and color changes are not going to carry over from this word processor into AO3, but the italics will. And the fact that this and this and this are all on separate lines and all have space between them, that is going to carry over as well. So really, if you want to get a good idea of the way that it's going to look in AO3, we can just select all of it, right? Change the font to all the same thing, change the color to all the same thing, and this is what it's going to look like. Except also it's not going to be indented. That's something that you can force AO3 to do, but I don't really think it's so yeah. So now predicting what it's going to look like in AO3, you can tell that there is a bit of a difference in that it is now much harder to not only tell who is speaking, but when they are texting versus what's prose just by looking at it. So we are going to kind of undo these changes that we've done, right? And now our end goal is going to be trying to get AO3 to emulate this as much as we can. So we're just going to copy all of this. Now we're going to move back into AO3. All right, I'm going to go over to this other tab I have open just so we can keep this Homestuck skin page open in this. Click over there, and then we are going to start by posting a new work. All right, so we're going to go right over here, post new work. All right, so all we're going to fill out here is the required information because this is just an example. Let's say it's Jen. Let's say somebody fucking dies because what does it matter? Work title, test. You can tell I have been doing a lot of these kinds of tests. So we'll call this one test A. Moving down, moving down, moving down, moving down. Whatever language. Did I pick a fandom? I think I might have skipped fandom. I did. All right. So you actually don't have to put Homestuck as your fandom. You can be writing for any fandom and use this skin. I actually used this skin for a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fix, so it doesn't really matter what you think. I'm going to put Homestuck just, because that's what we're doing, but you don't have to. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that you need to do that is not required to make a draft, and that's the only reason I'm doing other required ones, is because if you don't have these, it literally won't let you form the draft. And it's very important to form a draft and then preview it so you can test all these changes that you're doing. Is this right here, right? So this drop down menu is going to have for you, if you have never imported your own work skin, I've written my own CSS work skins or edited other people's work skins or done whatever. So I have a bunch of options here. But if you have not done that, and if you are watching this video, I assume you have not done that, you are only going to have three options. You are going to have basic formatting, you're going to have Homestuck skin, and that's the code we were looking at earlier, and that is an Undertale work skin. So those are your three that you should have available to you. So we are going to um, Homestuck skin. And you might have noticed that I had one in there called Homestuck, but like better. We will go into that in the second video once we have a better idea of what the base skin looks like. Okay. So that is the only thing that you need to do to make sure this coding works is that, and then you need to, code it right. But this is completely vital because if you turn this off, the coding's not going to mean anything because HTML coding is all about defining things. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be giving certain paragraphs or certain blocks of text a label. And the only way that that label is going to mean anything to AO3 is if it has definition of that label available to it. Right. So if we look at this skin here, we're going to see that if we label something Dave right here, that means it's going to be font size 14. It's going to be bold. It's going to be in Courier, and it's going to be red. Right. But if we are not using this work skin and we classify something as Dave, that's not going to mean anything to them. So it is very important that you are selecting the Homestuck skin when you're doing this. All right, now we're going to walk on down here, right? So now you have the work text. Now you have two ways of inputting information into your draft here. You can either do the rich text editor or the HTML. So the way that I suggest you do this, right? If you want to conserve things like paragraphs, right? So remember how when we took off all of the formatting, everything was still on different lines and things were still italicized and what have you. If you want to keep that stuff, do not paste this directly into HTML. Sorry. HTML is just plain text. But if we click rich text, you're going to see a very, very, very basic facsimile of a typical word processor. So anything that any action that you can perform in here, right? So anything you can add a line, or you can add, like, so this is those big line breaks that you see, or you can bullet to bullet lists or number lists. You can change alignment. Anything that you do here, any option it gives you is stuff that will be conserved from your word process, right? So the fact the italics are available to us, that means that if we paste something in here and it's italicized, it will stay italicized in the final work, which is exactly why we're going to paste everything in here. Because if we scroll up to the beginning, look at this. That is italicized, just exactly what we want. And I'll show you what it looks like if we do the same thing with the HTML editor. Not italicized. And it's also all flush with each other, which is not what we want. This is going to be what we want later, but right now, that's not what we want, right? And remember, remember how it looked in our doc? It has spaces, but those are gone because we have pasted all of that directly into the HTML side of things. So if you've ever seen a fic where all of the paragraphs are like all touching each other for some reason, it's probably what they did. So we are not going to do that. That's not what we want because that's not what our doc looks like. So we're going to put it into the rich text editor and we're going to get it to look like this because that is what we are aiming for. And what I suggest now is to preview this because you can't save it as a draft until you preview it. So preview it, look at it, and then save this base. Save the raw text as a draft. So then as you try new things and preview them, and if something is broken, you can default to this, which we know works, which we know doesn't have any issues, right? That's just a pro tip. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want. Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is not like our docs. So let's get started. And it is a lot more straightforward than it seems to be to do this. So let's kind of get into it. So the first thing to explain is that a normal text on a page is what we call a plain class. I don't know. I just made that up. Nobody calls it that but me. This is all self-taught, but it doesn't really matter. So anything that is regular prose, we are going to leave as the typical AO3 formatting, right? So this and this, if we remember, if we're looking at our doc, those first two things are totally regular prose. We don't need to do anything to them, but it's this line and this line that we're going to focus on right now. These two things need to be changed, and we need to change. So what we need to do is we need to change this font needs to get changed, and the color of this, color of this, and the color of this all need to get changed. So let's do it. So because we are changing the entirety of this paragraph, right? That's why it is on its own line. Each thing on its own line separated by space is a paragraph. So we are changing this whole paragraph. And how we're going to do that is just by classifying or labeling the paragraph, right? And then we are going to type, if you had to guess, what would you guess? If you guessed pestrolog, you were right. Or if you guessed black, that would also be right. So if we look at this again, you can see what would get you this color right here, which is black. You could write black or you could write pestrolog. Those are both going to work exactly the same. I have always typed pestrolog, so that's what we're going to do, right? So now we have ascribed the label to this text, which means that this text, anything that is in this paragraph is going to be 14, size 14, bold, courier, black. Okay. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to classify this section and we're just going to call it Dave. Remember we looked earlier and it's just Dave. That's the class is Dave if we want it to look like Dave text. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Oh yeah, look at that. Hold on. Didn't we want that to be red and didn't we want that to be gray? Well, that's going to be a little bit more complicated, right? Because it's within something else. So the way that we've done these two is we've just classified the entire paragraph, but TG in brackets is not an entire paragraph, but there's got to be a way to do that, right? Of course there is. What we're going to do is we're going to, instead of classifying the whole paragraph, we're going to classify just a span. And it's very easy to remember. It's just span. And then we're going to classify it the exact same way that we classified everything else. The only thing is that you need an ending. So, oh, what did I just do? I don't know how I zoomed in. Sorry. This is a new computer. We're going to have to close that span. Okay. And that is one of the most important things to remember about a span is that you must close it. Because if you don't close it, depending on kind of what's going on around it, it will either delete itself, so nothing will happen, or it will um, like affect its influence over more than you wanted it to, right? Because every span will have a hard end at the period at the end of the paragraph. And if you didn't um, close it yourself, it's just going to pretend that you didn't put anything there. So it would delete where it says carcat, it would just say span. And then it would auto put the end of the span right before the end of the paragraph. So just to be safe, every time you do a span, make sure you're closing it. Like you're closing it yourself because if you rely on AO3 to close it for you, it's going to delete whatever. So yeah, make sure you're always typing class. Sometimes I will forget to do that. So yeah, so span class equals, and you're gonna make sure that you're typing the equal. There's no space anywhere in here. The only space is between the word class and whatever you're classifying. And you need to make sure that these are always the upright apostrophes, not apostrophes, quotation marks. The curved ones will not work at all. So you can either do these directly in AO3 like we're doing now. You can, which is not recommended because if the internet goes out or something, you could lose your work. You could do it in Google Docs. Those will always have the straight up and down quotation marks, or you could do it in like a notepad. So anything that you can find that will not do the curved ones is how you're going to write code. All right, so we have affected this part of the text and we've ended it. We have started a span. This is the span. We've ended the span. Now let's see what this looks like. There we go. Pretty straightforward. So now what we're going to do is just kind of keep doing that. We are going to start classifying all the things that we want to look different from the base. And the reason why I think this is the easier way of doing it is because AO3 automatically ended these paragraph starting and paragraph ending markers, which means that all we have to do is for every line that Dave says, put that in. And it's already closed over here. Put that in. It's already closed over here. Put that in. It's already closed over here, right? So this is saving us a lot of work the way we're doing it. And I also find that with the spaces between them, like them as separate paragraphs, I think is easier to read. But that's personal. And like I said, if you want it to be more similar to the comic, or if you like it better the other way, you can do something different. Um, yeah, so now we are going to do this inline Vriska stuff. So we're going to do right. So we're going to do right, and this is a span because it's in the middle of a paragraph. Span class equals. Remember, we're not putting any spaces. Make sure the character names are always in all lowercase. Be aware of that. Yeah, so they're always going to be lowercase. Do not capitalize anything within like in the brackets. So anything that you're doing in brackets, do not capitalize. Okay. All right. So now we've done her inline text, and now we have all this Carcat dialogue to get to. So we're going to change that to cart. No, you do have to spell everything right, right? So you have to spell everything right, and it has to be all lowercase. Those are some of the bigger stumbling blocks for beginners. And also making sure that you're using the right I keep saying apostrophe, quotation marks, and also making sure that you are closing all of your spans. You may be tempted to figure out a way, if you have three messages in a row, for example, to classify all of these things all together. That is very tempting and it can be done, but that's also very easy to mess up and very hard to fix if you don't know what you're doing. So it is going to be a little bit more laborious to go through and individually label each paragraph like this, but this is the safest way of doing it. Trust me, I've had a lot of practice. Oh, I missed a dateline. Um, I've had a lot of practice doing this, and I know where the pitfalls are. Right. So now we're back at this is a pester log. So I'm going to show you that if you do black, it's going to work the exact same way. Okay, and then we're going to add in a span in here. Span class equals quote Dave. All right, the end span span class. Oh, I already had a carcat copied, I think, but that's fine. Okay, shit, I did that last time too. A lot of people do it like that where they color the entire names and don't put these. You can do whatever you want. This is the way it is in the comic, but who cares? It's fan fiction on AO3. Who gives a shit? All right, so let's take a look. Right, so we have our italics. We've got this. We've got inline Friska dialogue. We've got them going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and that's it. And then some stuff happened in the end. So yeah, sorry if this sucks. I wrote it for like really quick earlier before I started filming. So there we go. That is the most basic way to use this for more for things like this with no spaces between, for a closer look at the code, for a look at my own personal code. Check out the next video. Yeah, thanks for watching.